continuing our coverage of the nation paying tribute to former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh. I am very privileged to be joined by N.K. Singh, former Chief of the Finance Commission, a former Rajya Sabha MP, and also someone who is the President of the Institute of Economic Growth. Mr. N.K. Singh, thank you so much for speaking to Mirror Now. My first question to you is, how would you choose to remember the giant that was Dr. Manmohan Singh as an economist, as a former Prime Minister, as a parliamentary colleague of yours, or simply as a gentle reformer?
So it's very complex because for me, my first meeting with Dr. Manmohan Singh, which continued, was not in India, was in New York in 1971 when he was working with the UNDP and he hadn't joined the Indian government. Thereafter, he joined as economic advisor in the Ministry of Commerce in 1971 and was closely associated from that time. Shortly thereafter, in 1972, he moved as the chief economic advisor to the government of India in the Ministry of Finance, and our relationship had continued in multiple forms. He worked in the Ministry of Commerce at a time, if you recall, which was a time of controls on imports and exports, doing away with market economics, with barter trade, and trying to meet our immediate balance of payments crisis. Thereafter, I'd closely worked with him in the Ministry of Finance when he was the finance minister, and I was in the ministry handling the negotiations with the IMF and the World Bank. I found him to be a man with zest, with determination. When I had gone to congratulate him, when he became the finance minister, he told me that for far too long, India had been shackled by excessive regulations. We have moved away from allowing our people the opportunity and the potential. Then told me that he will change all that is necessary. He was obviously hinting at the 1991 budget, which unshackled India in multiple ways, doing away with the license permit Raj, doing, along with trade liberalization, exchange rate corrections. And that period of 5 years was perhaps a watershed moment in India's economic reforms. Much later, I had the privilege to work with him when he was the Prime Minister and I was a member of Parliament. We shared this endearing relationship. Manmohan Singh spoke softly, sometimes inaudibly, but we parliamentarians felt that the content of whatever he said had great amount of persuasion and conviction, and irrespective of ideological divides. Whenever he spoke, he was listened with rapt attention and with the kind of dignity which both as Prime Minister, but more importantly, as a sagacious advisor and someone who in some ways would want to mentor change. And I saw him closely at that time. I also saw him that he had achieved daunting success as finance minister, because that was addressing an immediate economic crisis. That he was really working with P.V. Narasimha Rao very closely at that time. Later, subsequently, he was his own master. He was a prime minister. But whatever be the ideological considerations, the party constraints, perhaps he was stymied in his flexibility and the ability to take decisions which would be far-reaching, given the ideological mindset of the organization and the party he came from. So from this point of view, if we reflect on his legacy, he changed India's economic history in an irretrievable way. He could have changed it even more had he got the support and been able to build consensus, particularly in his own party.
Mr. Singh, you are, of course, the president of the Institute of Economic Growth, and you, if I'm not mistaken, you actually succeeded Dr. Manmohan Singh as president of the IEG in 2021. You gave us a very fascinating insight into his mind in 1991. 30 years later, in 2021, when you took over the reins of the IEG, did you get a glimpse of what Dr. Manmohan Singh's vision was for India's economy and its growth in this decade, in this century, 30 years later, after he had transformed the economy once by ushering in liberalization?
You're absolutely correct that the bylaws of the Institute of Economic Growth is that the president, once elected by the General Assembly of the IIG, holds office for life. Manmohan Singh was under no obligation to resign because all his predecessors, who were only 5 before Dr. Manmohan Singh, had all remained the president till their life. He was the first one who, with alacrity, sensitivity, and with concern, talked to me and said that his health did not permit him to discharge the obligations of the president of the institute, and then suggested that he was going to propose my name to the General Assembly to succeed him. I was overwhelmed because, really speaking, it was not necessary for him to do so. But his vision was such that he regarded the Institute of Economic Growth to be a confluence of domain understanding with policy making. He wanted research organizations.
Okay, Mr. N.K. Singh, my final question at this point. If I'm not mistaken, you shared the Rajya Sabha with him as a colleague from 2008 onwards, till, of course, Dr. Singh retired. Any outstanding memory or anecdote you can have of him as a parliamentarian? Because the nation's outstanding memories, even in his later years when his health was letting go of him, he still made a point to attend parliament in a wheelchair and exercise his democratic duties as a voter, as a parliamentarian. Any insights you could share to him about his discipline and about his basic ethos as a parliamentarian that you observed when you were sharing the Rajya Sabha with him?
He was a great respecter of tradition, of precedents, of the sanctity of what Parliament represented. He brought about his own great dignity and humanness and great adherence to the rules and procedures of Parliament, something which we find greatly missing these days in parliamentary conduct. In this sense of the term, a great respecter of the sanctity of the institution, I remember him as not only a great prime minister, a great parliamentarian, but something which brought dignity to the sanctity of what the House of Representatives and the upper house meant, differentiating that the House of the people represented the voice of the people, the upper house represented the House of the elders. He brought that dignity in his interventions and in the focused discussions. He was precise, he was short, he was sometimes almost inaudible, but we would yearn to hear every word because there was always pearls of wisdom in whatever he said.